Cool, you made it. So, I'm really glad to see you here. I've been hiding from her and phone. She's still hacked off about that dress. And then Adeline went and sent her a list of demands. Oh my goodness, I've never seen steam come out of someone's ears before. That was a big mistake. Big mistake, but what are you gonna do about it? Except keep out of her way. She's so mad. So mad. Anyway, hey, I am here and I have a new book for you. I've got a new book for you, but first, the housekeeping, man. The housekeeping. Templates. You should really check them out. They're like dirt cheap. If you buy them digital, they're only $1. If you buy them hard copy like this, they're shipped for free. So there's that. And then, of course, you want to write your own novel? You want to get started? Don't know where to start? There you go. Place to start. So that's what we have just to start off with to help you with your writing. Now we're going to talk about another writer. Yeah, because that's what we do, isn't it? Yeah. And today we're going to be talking about Sylvia Plath, because the 11th of February, tomorrow, if you're watching this when it premieres, is the 59th anniversary of Sylvia Plath's death. She was only 30. And that actually is something that makes me a little different to most Plath readers, because I didn't read Plath till I was older than she ever was. I didn't read Plath until I was 31 or 32. Most people come to Plath as teenagers, which I don't necessarily think is the greatest thing, actually. A lot of people come to Plath via school. She's very dark. I'm not certain that she is really the best writer for teenagers, even though she's used that way. I think she's very dark. I think she's very complicated. I think she actually requires maturity to approach her, because part of what made me so resistant, I actually resisted Plath for a good decade and a half. So I didn't do her as a teenager, and I didn't go near her in my 20s because of the mystique of Plath, all these mythologies around her, these ideas, and really, frankly, the romanticization of her, what was clearly an appallingly serious mental ill health. She died at 30 as a result of depression. Okay? There is nothing romanticized about that. There is no, let's lay blame here, there, and everywhere. No, she died because of her mental illness, and she lived in a period where mental illness was very misunderstood and very, very poorly treated. Which brings us to our book for this week, which is The Bell Jar, which is also, coincidentally or not, celebrating its 59th anniversary. The Bell Jar was published a month before Plath's death. And in fact, the poor reception of the book initially is somewhat believed to have partially triggered the appalling decline in her fairly fragile mental state at that time. So although no one factor is a cause, and there is suggestion that it may have actually been the medication she was on made her situation worse rather than better, which is kind of a horrible, terrifying thing. No one thing can be laid upon why someone does something like that, apart from the illness itself. They died of that. So, the Bell Jar. The Bell Jar is, generally speaking, a book that many women encounter when they're teenagers or university graduates or at university, and they go, "Oh my God, it's me." It's not you, it's Sylvia. And I wouldn't normally say that about a writer, except that Sylvia was an incredibly autoethnographic writer. Sylvia wrote her own life. She put herself into her writing in a far greater way. Every writer puts themselves into their writing, but she really made the writing about herself. This is essentially a period of Sylvia's life with names changed in a great manner. It is that level close to reality. In fact, there's a character in here a character in here based on a woman who threatened to sue the publishers because she felt that Sylvia had defamed her. Okay, so Sylvia wrote incredibly close to her life, and this really is part of what gives her mystique. Is she's writing out all these things that she feels and people identify with, and then they glamorize mental illness. Okay? You can see, I'm too old for this crap. I'm too old for this. It doesn't work on me. I was too old when I read it for it to do that. However, I do admire her for what she could do. Also, being over 30, I had a better understanding of relationships than many of the people who read her when they're very young. And so, when I read Sylvia, I didn't just read Sylvia, I read Ted Hughes as well. Which, in some ways, makes me look like this for a lot of the rabid Sylvia girls. Is like, oh, but you're talking to the enemy. No, he was her husband, and their writing is inextricably linked to the point that they wrote at either ends of the same table. So it's very hard to take them as separate and entirely separate entities. They are separate entities. Their writing is entirely different. However, their relationship is in the writing and needs to be acknowledged. They were married at the time of her death. They were not divorced. They were separated. She had the shits with him because he was having an affair, which is okay, fair enough. But it was they were married. Plath Hughes is on her grave, so I'm not one of those people who's going to ignore that. And I feel that interpretation of her as this tragic victim, which is unfortunate because she's not a tragic victim in the way that she's portrayed the mythology of it, is juvenile. Once you're over 30, you've got a much better handle on relationships. You have a better understanding of how the world works, frankly. But back to this book. This book is the 50s. This book is the 50s, and it follows Esther Greenwood, who is the Sylvia Plath stand-in. Esther Greenwood, as she goes to New York and does an internship in a fashion magazine, has this amazing, wonderful time, but finds it incredibly overwhelming. Like Plath, Esther has lost her father as a child. Like Plath, Esther is a high achieving. I find that a lot of people will call her an overachiever, and I think overachiever is a really judgmental thing. It's like, oh, you're because you notice that they only call girls overachievers. You're an overachiever. We only expected you to go here, and you're over here, and like there was no need for you to do that. It's incredibly patronizing. So she's a high achieving. She's very intelligent. She, much like Plath, exactly like Plath, she is an intelligent, driven, ambitious perfectionist. And the world she ends up in is not really giving her the space to be that, to be allowed to be any of that. She just finds that her ideals and her life and what she wants is just not on the table. What is on the table is not what she wants, and she feels trapped in the options that are available, and trapped in that feeling when you finish uni and they're not 100% certain where you go. There are options, but if you take one road, the others close down. Of course, it feels like that, but really, it's not like that. You feel like you're in such a rush to pick something, to do something, career or a family or travel or whatever. And, and I think this is one of the advantages of reading it when you're older, because you're able to sit back and go, oh, honey, chill. Life is a lot longer than you think, and it takes a lot more to fill it than you think. You can do a lot more than looks apparent right this second. All right? So speaking from where I was when I read Plath in my early 30s, I was at university again because I finished my degree. I went out, I taught, and then I decided, you know what? I'm not progressing where I want to as a writer, and so I'll go back to uni and I'll do another degree. And then look, here I am. I'm on YouTube talking to you about writing. I'm running a publishing company. I write books. There is time for everything. But Esther doesn't see that, and a lot of the girls, and I sound really mean saying girls, but they are girls. This is not a book that, unless your English teacher forces you to read it, in which case, sus, very, 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 very sus if your English teacher forces you to read this, because honestly, dear God, I've only met one person, and most boys won't go anywhere near it. So most of Plath's audience is female, is young, is impressionable, and go, oh, it's me. Didn't work on me. Bit too old. Sometimes you get to books and they don't work on you because you're too old for them. Personally, I'm rather glad of it. I actually I saw what it did to I'm going to say children because I'm old enough to say children now. But I see what it does to teenage girls as a teenage girl, and I didn't like it. I thought it sounded really self-indulgent. and a bit disturbed. Because on one half of the book is this this world of parties and things, and then the other, as this doesn't work, as she comes to the crisis, Esther's crisis is massive. Esther makes several attempts on her life and finds herself in psychiatric care. This is not psychiatric care in the 21st century. This is psychiatric care in the 1950s. In fact, knowing what we know, psychiatric care is barely even an appropriate word. It is not care. What was happening in psychiatric hospitals in this period is part of the reason that mental health is so stigmatized to this day. 60, 70 years later, mental health conditions are still stigmatized to this day. Mental health professional support is still difficult to get people to admit they need, because people still have the images of what the abuses. This was not mental care. This was mental health abuse that happened then. And that makes this book incredibly challenging, and why I feel that I would not give this book to a struggling teenager now, because the mental health abuses, we're talking insulin therapy, where it was a horrible thing, absolutely vile. I mean, anyone who has looked at like healthcare now knows you don't want high insulin. They'd basically inject people with insulin to go into a diabetic coma and hope that cleared their head. It didn't work. It killed people. Insulin therapy, she suffers in this. She suffers electroshock therapy, which is its reputation, its feared reputation derives from this time when it was administered, no anesthetic, no sedatives, no real aftercare. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying supposed care. This is a world without effective, safe antidepressants. This is a world where if you could get away with not mentioning that you were struggling, you just didn't say anything, because the healthcare was terrifying. And this is what Esther interacts with. She does recover. Plath also interacted with healthcare in the same manner, did recover for several years, went to England on a Fulbright scholarship, where she met Ted Hughes. Their marriage lasted 6 years until the end of her life. So it is a really interesting book. I think the fact that she died in 1963 is really sad, in that there was so much more. I mean, what could she have made of the 60s? The 60s were at a time when things were actually opening out, and we'll be having a look at another writer who starts writing in the 60s as this world is opening out and becoming more free for women, but a woman who had suffered and struggled and fought and showed that level of grit and determination and ambition and strength to have made a name, a legitimate, serious name for herself as a writer in the 50s and early 60s. For her to die when she did is tragic. That's the tragedy. The tragedy of her life is not some romantic mythology. The tragedy of her life is that she died before she could really move out into the world. This is a book that really shows the narrowness of the options for women in the 50s, and it shows the mental strain of kicking against that, the difficulty of kicking against that, the strength that it took to kick against that. This is a fascinating book. Do not give it to teenagers. It is not for teenagers. It's for adults. It's not for teenagers. But do read it. Do read Plath. Read her with Hughes. There are a lot of really good non-fiction works written about Plath. I'll list some of them below. And I will bring you something a bit, obviously a bit cheerier next time. Peace, love, and I will see you later. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.